Hello, everyone. Appreciate you joining us today for this session with FireEye. I am Patrick Colville, a senior analyst at DB, covering the cybersecurity and the infrastructure software space. The format of this session will be a fireside chat with listener Q&A. There's a chat box where you can ask questions. The questions are anonymous, so we'll not mention your name or your company affiliation. So let's kick it off with some introductions. On the call, we've got Kevin Mandia, the CEO of FireEye, and we've got Frank Verdecanna, the CFO, with us today. FireEye, as you all know, is a pioneer in advanced threat protection in cybersecurity and one of the best-known brands in the space. Guys, thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Patrick.
Let's jump into questions, and I think the obvious place to start, the elephant in the room, is the coronavirus pandemic. So Can you just talk us through? I guess we all know that cybersecurity risks are increasing in enterprise, but how has the pandemic kind of changed dynamics around cybersecurity risks, and what are you guys seeing at FireEye?
Yeah, and this is Kevin speaking, Patrick. Just give you some actuals. I was talking to some of our threat folks this morning, our threat intelligence analysts, and last year in 2019, we responded to 858 intrusions. And that means something happened. People called us to come in to figure out what happened and then how to remediate it, how to go from point A in our security program to point B in our security program. So that was 858 times last year. This year, halfway through the year, we're on pace to far exceed last year's 858. So there's no question we're more busy. And we have a bias. People don't hire us to respond to breaches with our Mandia consultants if they're 5 minutes behind the alert, 5 minutes behind the breach. We primarily respond in, the Global 2000. We respond at targeted entities, and we respond when the breach is at a scale and scope where simply you need help to do it. So there's no question the threat activity is at least more successful this year. And, we looked at our typical clients this year. We've done well over 500 breach investigations already this year. 100% of these customers had AV that was up to date. 100% were behind firewalls. 100% had multi-vendor environments. Only 47% of them organically detected their intrusions. Meaning that means 53% of the time the detection mechanism was outside the organization. So clearly just the pace, I've got a bunch of high-level conclusions I'd share with you, but, as a CEO, you kind of overgeneralize. If I picked one, and there's about 10 conclusions I already have for the year, one is just ransomware is on the rise. And it's kind of evolved where it used to be ransomware kind of was executed in isolation, and you'd pay to get a decryptor. It's always being done to make money. Around November of 2017, we started responding to cases where you kind of got hit with ransomware and you were extorted because the attackers, they encrypted your drives and said, we stole documents and you have to pay a certain amount of Bitcoin or some other digital currency to get your data. We won't release your data. So it's kind of ransomware plus extortion. This year is the year of ransomware. It's just really widespread. It's hundreds of millions of dollars. And I would advise every single company to make sure you're testing yourself to see, could ransomware work on your network or does your endpoint protect it? So that all happened. And tying that to COVID, because, by the way, I could spend all 30 minutes on this question, just wanted to give you at the highest level, how's that tied to COVID? Well, one, we're defending remote users overnight. Second, we're defending cloud resources because when we went remote, many people went to cloud very fast. And my third conclusion is for many organizations, because of COVID, because of work from home, their security operations, whether it was one person or 100, it's not as collaborative as it used to be, and it may have come down a notch. So we're having so many breaches now because potentially a distributed workforce may not be quite as productive in securing an enterprise as one that was in the room together. And I'm not sure if that's the case, but the mean time to detect breaches is going up at organizations, not down right now. And that means to me that as we all went to work from home, maybe we lost a little bit of visibility on our networks. Maybe we didn't have the endpoint protection we needed everywhere. Maybe we didn't have identity management quite fine-tuned as well as we needed to. So anyway, that was a long answer, and I know we got 30 minutes, so I'll shut up. But the question, I could probably speak a whole hour just on how's COVID impacting security.
To be honest, I mean, that insight is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
I guess, I mean, the probably the second part of the question really is about how it's impacting your business. So, you know, the metrics that investors will care about will be like, you know, deal sizes, closing rates, churn dynamics. So, you know, what's been the impact for FireEye?
Sure, Patrick. This is Frank. You know, from a sales motion perspective, you know, we really haven't seen that big of an impact from COVID. I think, you know, initially at the very end of Q1, you know, I think there was a couple deals that were kind of paused that, you know, came in the second quarter. But, you know, other than that, you know, COVID has been one of those things that, you know, I think people were a little bit nervous initially, but it's kind of got it back to business. You know, when you look at our company, we're only doing about 10% of our business is in industries that were hard hit by COVID. The other 90+% is in areas that it feels like it's kind of business as usual. We initially had some concerns that, you know, some of our services were delivered on site, and so we were concerned that, you know, customers might want to wait on those projects. But what we saw in the second quarter and for the guidance we gave in the third quarter is that, you know, services are as busy as ever, and that customers have been very comfortable with us delivering all our services remotely. And so we haven't seen a negative impact there. And then, you know, I think we're probably seeing a few less new deals closed because of not being able to kind of build those relationships in person. But at the same time, you know, renewal rates have ticked up a little bit, and our cross-sell motion has ticked up a little bit. So all in all, you know, it just hasn't been a big impact.
Okay, that's very clear. So I want to make this interactive as possible. So, you know, any investors got any questions, please post them to the chat. Or if you can't get the chat to work, then email me. It's patrick.colville@db.com. So feel free to shoot any questions over. I guess, Kevin, can we just talk about you know, network sandboxing demand in general? So, you know, I guess how is cloud adoption changing dynamics there?
Well, first, you know, the network product that FireEye had started as a sandbox, but it's moved way beyond that. It's being updated. You can almost think of it as a managed IDS combined with signatureless-based detection using sandboxing or dynamic inspection. It's updated dynamically in a learning system. So as we respond to hundreds of breaches, as we're doing this call, by the way, we currently have over 100 active investigations going on. And we're looking at all these attacks that are circumventing the controls of many vendors, and we're pumping all that intelligence into our network security product. So a sandbox is a component of it, and we probably don't do as good a job as we should of marketing the fact that it's also got a whole bunch of different TTPs and indicators in it that are live, that are being fed from the front lines to make sure our customers are defended. No question, as folks are heading to the cloud, they still want to have visibility. They still want to have protection. So we started years ago taking our IP out of the iron, out of the box, and making sure that we could be deployed in AWS, we could be deployed in Google Cloud, we could be deployed in Microsoft Azure and defend our customers as they go to the cloud. I think cloud security is ultimately going to be a little bit different than on-prem. I don't think you just bring everything and drag it. But folks that like the detection efficacy and the up-to-date learning system we have in our network security can bring that to their cloud infrastructure if they choose to do so.
Okay, got it. Frank, there's a question coming for you from one of the audience members around, I guess, the stock buyback program. So, you know, would you consider a stock buyback program? And, just any color there or any thoughts or around kind of capital allocation would be great.
Sure. So we haven't established a buyback program as of yet. I mean, it's something we obviously look at, all strategic uses of cash. I think if you look at FireEye and we've seen increasing leverage in the business and we're starting to see increasing cash flows. And so I think, as we continue to drive more free cash flow, I think that gets to be something that, we would seriously consider, depending on where we're at from a value perspective. So I think it's something, that's always on the table to look at, but probably until we generate a significant amount of free cash flow, it probably won't be the first thing we utilize cash for.
Got it. And I guess, whilst I've got you, I mean, how should we think about investing for growth and over the coming years and the kind of, and the margin trajectory?
Yeah, I think in the second quarter we really showed that, we can drive significant leverage in this business, and we hit a record operating margin of 10%. And, I think as we look forward, our expectation is that we'll grow revenue faster than we grow OpEx, and so we'll see increased leverage in the business. I think if you look at what we've been investing in over the last year, we've been investing significantly in the higher growth areas of the business. So we haven't, even though our OpEx has trended down in total, we've been allocating, more resources and more investment dollars from the more mature areas of business to the higher growth areas, and we'll continue on that kind of investment trend. But I think because of the fact that, there's a lot of reallocation going on there, our overall OpEx should stay relatively flat, and with increased revenues, we'll see increased leverage there.
Got it. I mean, that's very clear. Kevin, can I switch back to you and just talk about the email security space? And historically, FireEye in email security was used kind of alongside other secure email gateways. I mean, is that still the case now, or is FireEye, and I guess how do you expect that to trend? I mean, is FireEye expecting to displace other vendors and become the kind of core messaging protection vendor?
Yeah, what we're doing is we're taking all our detection capabilities that are in our network security product and our email security product, and we're also making that available more in an API base, so we can backstop other people's products and at the same time frame provide us, an email gateway should we need to do it. It's my opinion, just observing even what FireEye did with their own email, everybody, it seems like there's a pretty heavy trend to go into cloud-based email. It's just a lot easier than having your own IT staff managing all that stuff. So folks are going to O365 and other cloud products. So we're certainly looking for a way, as you look at our email, our on-prem email is not growing. It's our cloud-based email that's growing. And I haven't found, if it exists, a email solution that stops every single spearfish. If I'm a CISO, I'm looking at how do I backstop, my primary email gateway, because that's the number one way folks are still breaking in, is they're targeting folks who are spearfishing and breaking in. So we're used as both. We are a primary gateway for folks, and I think Frank can give you a breakdown there. But we also are used as a second layer because folks know that we're updating our email capability with everything we're learning on the front lines, literally, dozens of times a day. So, Frank, do you have any additional comments on that? I think it's, driving towards where we're a gateway and where we're, the second layer.
Yeah, and it's typically just depending on the customers. Like the large enterprises that are very security conscious and maybe less budget conscious, have used FireEye traditionally as a backstop to their existing email secure gateway provider. And we've been really successful there because we're catching, things that others are not. In the kind of mid-market, it's more likely that we are their kind of secure email gateway solution, because those customers typically don't want to be paying, multiple email security providers. So it really just depends on kind of the mix of the customer. Okay.
And Kevin, I mean, you mentioned that around that, Office 365 and email just makes a ton of sense.
Right.
I mean, how far do you think we're in that kind of adoption curve? I mean, would you say the bulk of your customers are now in cloud-based Outlook, cloud-based Exchange, pardon me, or okay, interesting.
And yeah, I think
well,
we're pretty
Patrick,
far
just to
along.
clarify,
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to clarify that, it's most brand new email customers are immediately going to our cloud solution. Most existing email customers, because, we've been selling, email since before the IPO, are still on-premise email customers. But, that mix will continue to shift as the vast majority of new email customers are going straight to our cloud solution.
Got it. And so I think that the kind of natural question here is, as cloud adoption of Outlook and Exchange kind of, reaches maturity, how should we expect, I guess, share shift dynamics to change? I mean, will it be easier for FireEye to take share from other email vendors, once the bulk of customers in the cloud, or does the market kind of, I guess, solidify because people are kind of at steady state?
Frank, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we have, if we look at our mix of new customers coming aboard, many are displacing kind of legacy email solutions, and so that cloud adoption has been a tailwind to that part of the business. But we also have, many customers that are looking for, another layer of protection on top of whatever solution they have, whether it's, on-premise or cloud email. And so, I think there's going to be opportunities, continued opportunities, even as more customers get to the cloud, because, especially if you look at our email solution, a lot of the new investment dollars are going directly into our kind of cloud email solution.
Okay, that's very clear. I mean, I'd love to switch gears to endpoint, because that's a space that's been highly topical during COVID-19 as a way to protect users working remotely. Just help us understand what, when you're going to market, why does FireEye win in endpoint versus other providers? Because it is a crowded space, and it's a space where I know many investors and myself, try to struggle to work out the product differences. So when you guys win, what are customers choosing you for?
Yeah, and this is Kevin speaking. I think first and foremost, we built at Mandia an endpoint that was for forensics experts. And I always said we were the endpoint that you needed when your endpoint failed to protect you. So we backed into the endpoint protection space since 2014, but we were always built to do precision strike forensics. In other words, if you're on a network of 100,000 endpoints, we always wanted to say, hey, let's be able to undelete compressed files on every machine here, and just you search your whole enterprise for evidence of compromise. And that's what the genesis of our endpoint was, different than many other endpoints. Some genesis was endpoint protection, and they tried to back into EDR. Some were EDR and backed into endpoint protection. We were actually forensics, backed into EDR, then backed into endpoint protection. And I liken it to, we actually did the hard stuff first, because the forensics aspect on the endpoint is actually the hardest thing to do. And that's why our incident response is, I think, the largest practice on the planet, because it's technology enabled by an agent that can do forensics at scale. That being said, our agent has evolved from endpoint forensics to endpoint protection over the years. And we differentiate by having the endpoint protection, yet experts can search their enterprise for evidence of compromise in case, that something got through, or somebody's using third-party credentials to log into a network without authorization. So the experts like it. The folks that really don't care about endpoint tech like the protection. And, we wrote machine learning models to find malicious files back in 2008, 2009. Those things have been baked for a long time. We have them in our products, so we do signatureless-based detection on the endpoint. We do it with multiple ways, both with sandboxing and dynamic inspection, as well as static inspection. So that's nerd language for this. We have a multi-layer of defense on the endpoint where we can do signatureless-based detection. We can pump in indicators of compromise. We can fuel our endpoint with the protection that we provide from our experts. And then something we don't do a great job of telling the world is we have dozens of folks that look through every single endpoint alert and the metadata coming into our threat intelligence network to see if there's evidence of compromise just based on weak indicators. They're not high fidelity indicators, but when taken in scope and looking at all of the picture, the totality of the alerts makes us think there's something malicious going on. So long story made short, we have a comprehensive endpoint agent. It can do endpoint protection, EDR capability. It can stream data. It's on Linux. It's on Mac. It's on Windows. And it's also something that the forensic, high technology experts like the flexibility and the ability to write their own scripts for it.
Got it. And just to kind of, I guess, finish up on endpoint, I mean, is FireEye typically used alongside a traditional kind of EPP vendor or alongside a new kind of EDR vendor like CrowdStrike, or in the vast majority of cases, is it just FireEye?
It's both, it's interesting. Like, I don't even know if I track it. I know we've been used to replace the legacy AV vendors in their entirety, rip them out and put us in. And I also know that we've been used aside other endpoints because of our forensic capability, and they use us, they have our detection capability and another endpoint's detection capability. One of the most interesting things about endpoint is for years, Windows operating system shipped with Windows Defender. You get AV every time you open up Windows. Behind that AV, you get the malicious software removal toolkit or MSRT, and you got all these other endpoints. So what I've observed is some folks do like having multiple endpoints for protection, and then ours backstop it as a forensics endpoint, and some folks just use us to do the whole thing.
Got it. And can we take a step back? So this is an investor question around, I guess, just competitive dynamics more broadly. And the question from the investor is, how are you feeling about competition? And, is there any notable trends around heightening competition or not, I guess, that you could call out?
Frank, you want to comment on that first?
Yeah, I think, as we look at the various areas that we play in, I think competition has been relatively the same throughout the year. I'd say probably the only difference I've seen is that, in the endpoint space, a year ago, we were competing with 2 or 3 players there and a legacy player. And right now, it seems like most of the endpoint deals that we're in, and it's us against CrowdStrike or Carbon Black. The legacy guys don't seem to be, as prevalent or at least making the short list as they have in the past. And there isn't 5 or 6 different endpoint players making short lists as they have in the past. So I think it's concentrated competition with a few different vendors, and I think because of our EDR capabilities and because of the fact that we can couple it with services and other subscriptions, I think we feel pretty good about that opportunity for us.
Yeah, and this is Kevin speaking. We have different competitors for the different things we do, right? With email, we'll have to compete with the proof points of the world. We may have to compete with O365, maybe, rarely, but sometimes Mimecast. You can go through our portfolio. We have different competitors. The things that stick out to me where we have the least amount of competition are things like security validation, where we have all the intelligence so that folks that are out there wondering, geez, could ransomware break out on my network? We provide the means to run any ransomware safely and simply so you test it and get unvarnished truth, the binary answer. We believe security validation is going to be a very growing market because every board out there, every CEO out there, every executive out there, and every CISO is wondering, am I currently compromised and don't know it, or could I be compromised? And how good is my team? And the way to test that is just simply run the attacks in a safe way and get unvarnished truth. Did my infrastructure stop the attack? Yes or no? If it didn't stop it, did it at least detect it? Yes or no? If it didn't stop it and it didn't detect it, what do we have to do to figure out, how to stop it? So I believe our security validation, we don't see competition in that area very strongly. Another thing we have that I think is wholly unique to FireEye, I haven't heard that anybody's built it and I haven't run into anybody, is we have a global threat intelligence capability where we speak 34 languages. We're in 23 different countries. And these are folks that take our frontline knowledge and do additional research, both open source collections plus private collection from our technology, from our dynamic threat intelligence, and from our front lines, and do the work there. And then in services, there's a couple of things that we're unique at where I don't feel a lot of pressure or competition. One is in the incident response space, we've been doing this for decades. This is what we do. When we show up, most of the time we have literally a dossier on who we're responding against, and we know, oh, you're up against these guys. Here's who broke in. Here's what they normally do. Here's what to do about it. And we have experienced teams that have responded on behalf of law enforcement, responded on behalf of victim companies, responded on behalf of insurers. You name it, we've done it. So there's not a lot of competition for that. When the phone rings and people need help, you know, we're the pros from Dover that show up. And then the fourth thing where I don't see a lot of competition is in red teaming. Can you come in and not just break into our network, but break in and get to a certain person's email or get to a SCADA system or an OT device or get to healthcare records and test that. So those are the things where we feel the least amount of headwinds due to competition. Intel, security validation, and several other services.
And you briefly touched on the services component. I mean, can you just talk through how the coronavirus pandemic has affected trends in kind of Mandia's consulting and services business? And, you know, I'm going to make this a multi-part question because
Sure.
we like to do. One of your competitors, Palo Alto, acquired the Crypsys Group
right
about 3 weeks ago. So I guess how does that? What do you make of that?
Well, I think I agree with that kind of strategy. I've never, and this is Kevin Mandia speaking, when I thought about a security company, how do you build great products in security without frontline experience, without real security expertise on the front lines every day? If you think you can go out with PMs and ask your customers what they think they need, they're going to say, I need better protection. I need this assurance that your technology can stop the threats. That requires expertise. So I think I've always felt it is strategically important to any software company building security software. You better get your butts on the front lines and learn what's going on out there. We had a whole 20-year plus run in security with companies that had no frontline experience. And when their software is evaded, they didn't even know about it. That's why I started a company that responded to breaches called Mandia, because believing antivirus was protecting you was just a false hope. It wasn't doing the trick. It had a model that didn't learn till it missed something, and the victims of the cyber intrusion submitted the malware back to those companies. That's not a learning system. That's a system that it's too late by the time the vendors were learning what was going on. So I agree with the strategy of getting frontline expertise into the organization, and figuring out what the customers want is shields up, that they can go to bed at night not having to worry about ransomware breaking out on their networks tomorrow. And the only way you're going to be able to build an ecosystem that can do that is you're red teaming, you're responding to breaches, you have great threat intelligence, you know the adversaries, you know their TTPs, and you're testing your customers and testing your products to make sure they can withstand the assault. Shy of that, I think it's real hard to build it.
Got it. That's very clear. I think we're running out of time, so I think this is unfortunately the last question we've got time for. FireEye is known for serving the top end of the market extremely well. You guys have some incredible logos in government, in financial services, defense, etc. The strategy of the last couple of years has been to make the products more accessible, I guess, to mid-sized businesses that maybe have slightly fewer dollar resources and headcount resources. Can you give us any metrics or any thoughts around the progress in FireEye competing in that kind of in the mid-size enterprise segment?
Frank, you want to jump on that one?
Yeah, I think, and it has been a focus area, and if you look at our roadmap, endpoint's a great example. If you look at our endpoint roadmap, a lot of the additional functionality and new functionality is about making the product easier to demo, easier to deploy, more intuitive user interface. So, originally a lot of our products were built for the security expert, but in a market where, you've got channel partners, trying to decide between, hundreds of different security products, the simpler your product is, the more likely you're going to get traction there. And so, our historic experience is, we haven't had a ton of channel leverage, so it's a huge opportunity for us. And I think as we continue to make those changes to products, we'll continue to see more and more channel leverage. And so I think we're in the early innings of that, but I think a lot of the recent introductions have been all around making the products easier, and in a cloud environment that's increasingly more important. So I feel really good about the fact that we're making the adjustments necessary to to begin getting traction in that market. And obviously I feel very good that we'll continue to be very important and very sticky to large enterprises as well.
Fantastic. Well, with that, unfortunately, we're out of time. Kevin Mandia, CEO of FireEye, Frank Verticana, CFO, thank you so much for joining us today at the DB Tech Conference. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.
Appreciate it. Take care now.
Have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You too. Bye.